Hi, I'm Craig Biddle, and this is Understanding. Today I'm going to continue with a mini-series I'm doing on what is faith. And we're going to hear from professional religionists about what they say faith is. Today we're going to hear from Bishop Robert Barron, and he's going to tell us what, according to him, from a Catholic perspective, faith is, and we're going to see whether his claim about what faith is makes sense.
The Protestant theologian Paul Tillich once said that faith is the most misunderstood word in the religious vocabulary. And I'm increasingly convinced that he was right about that. I must say, every day, I hear somebody say to me that faith is credulity, naivete, accepting something on the basis of no evidence. It's pre-scientific nonsense. It's the way children would think, etc.
I am one of the people who definitely claims that faith means, the religious meaning of faith is precisely the act of, or the alleged virtue of accepting ideas as true in the absence of evidence to support them. Now, I would never denigrate children by claiming that this is how children act. Children don't act that way, at least not naturally. Children want reasons. They want facts to support the ideas that they accept. So I certainly wouldn't characterize it that way. But I'm definitely of the school that the facts of reality that give rise to the need of the concept of faith, I'm talking about in the religious sense of the term, not merely as a synonym for trust or confidence, which we're going to hear more about from this Bishop Barron in a bit. But the religious meaning of faith is precisely the acceptance of ideas in the absence of evidence or in defiance of evidence.
Faith is being continually badmouthed. And on the basis of that characterization, people will draw these sharp distinctions between faith, so construed, and modern science. Modern science is rational, it's empirically based, it's self-critical, it's self-correcting, etc. And people draw the conclusion, isn't it great that the Western mind finally wriggled free of the terrible constraints of faith and moved into the clear, well-lighted space of reason?
Yes, I would be one of the people who says that as well. The centuries that Christianity and religion controlled much of the world were some of the most horrific times in all of human history. And the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, which brought forth reason, in part through Thomas Aquinas, the rediscovery of Aristotle and the delivery of Aristotle's secular ideas to the Western world, in large part through Thomas Aquinas when he was trying within the Catholic Church to reconcile reason and faith, a job that was frankly impossible, but that he tried nonetheless, demonstrates the difference, this difference between a world, quote, lit by faith and a world lit by reason. A world lit by reason is really lit because that's how you get things like, light bulbs and electricity and all of the modern luxuries that we live with today. They didn't come from people having faith or praying. They came from people activating their minds and thinking and then acting on that thinking. So I just want to say for the record that I am definitely one of the people who says, thank goodness that the Western world, at least for the most part, or largely, I should say, has come around to see that reason is our means of knowledge and that we should go by reason in pretty much all of the areas of our life. That's how we live as human beings and as civilized people, and how we produce the values on which our life and happiness depend. Going by faith is precisely what causes problems throughout history. If faith is a means of knowledge, which religionists ultimately, despite what they claim faith to be, they want to treat faith as a means of knowledge. We'll see more of that in a bit. As soon as you are able to treat faith as a means of knowledge, That means anytime you have faith that something is true, you can claim that you know it to be true and then act accordingly. So if an Old Testament advocate says, well, I have faith that the Old Testament is true and therefore we should kill homosexuals because that's what God says to do in Leviticus, then that's what we should do. What are you going to do with that? If faith is a means of knowledge, then his faith that that statement from the Bible is true and that it's from the Word of God and God exists because he has faith that God exists, therefore it's true that God exists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then you can't do anything with that. And this is the danger of faith. So, yes, I am very glad that the human race, at least the Western world for the most part, has come around largely to reason. We haven't come all the way around, which is why we still have to have these conversations about why faith isn't the means of knowledge and why religion is essentially a caveman philosophy that we need to get away from.
Isn't it tragic that the modern mind is still haunted by this specter from another age, faith, which is hindering and holding back the modern mind? Okay. As I say, almost every day, I hear that kind of characterization about what faith means.
Yeah, you might say faith is hindering and holding back the modern mind. Look someplace where faith is taken seriously and put into law, say Iran, where women have to wear bags, or Iran or Saudi Arabia, where women live in bags or at least covered, so that they won't, expose any of their flesh and tempt men who can't control themselves because God said we can't. And homosexuals are hung from cranes because God said they should be killed. And the government funds and supports terrorist organizations that are set to either convert everyone on the planet, especially the Jews, or eliminate them completely, especially the Jews, and so on and so forth. This is what faith means in practice. Or if you want to come to the United States and see what it means in practice, you can see the remnants of jihadism in the destruction of the Twin Towers and the slaughter of 3,000 people. And you can see the ways in which faith destroys young people's minds by teaching them to lie before they even know what honesty is. Yes, Mommy, I believe in God because I know that you told me I'll go to hell if I don't believe in God. Does the child really believe in God? Of course not. He's just doing what he's been threatened he must do. So I could go on, and I will in other videos, about the damage that faith does, both historically and in the present day, and both culturally and at a personal level. Think about all the people whose thinking and therefore actions have been completely throttled by their views about sex that they get from religion. Homosexuality is evil. Sex before marriage is forbidden. Masturbation is evil, and you'll go to hell if you do it, and so on and so forth. This stuff destroys people's minds. It destroys them psychologically, and not for a short period of time, for their entire life, in many cases. So yes, it would be nice if we were moving fully away from religion. Unfortunately, we're not. And that's the reason we've got to talk about this stuff.
Here's an analogy, which I think is illuminating. When you're coming to know someone, let's say there's a person that kind of fascinates you, and you might watch that person for a while. Maybe you see what she wears, how she comports herself, how she relates to other people. Maybe you check with mutual friends and find out certain things about her. Maybe today, of course, you would Google her name and you could find out a lot about probably where she's from, where she's educated, where she works, etc., right? You could find out a lot simply by using your reason. Looking at things objectively and making deductions and conclusions, you could come to a good deal of knowledge about that person. Okay, but let's say you really want to get to know this person. Eventually, you have to meet her, right? Now, when you meet her, maybe when you're up close, some of what you've discovered will be verified, by your own rational analysis. But eventually, something kind of wonderful and extraordinary is going to happen. Namely, that person is going to speak. Now, when she speaks, some of what she says probably will be in line with what you already knew. It'll simply confirm what you've already understood. But, the more you get to know that person, the more that person begins to open her heart to you, the more intimately you come to know her, what's going to happen? She will reveal things about herself that you would never know in any other way.
Okay. This is a pretty silly avenue he's going down here. So yes, when you meet someone, when you're getting to know someone, you might find out, where he or she went to school, how old he or she is, what activities he or she enjoys, and what music the person likes, and so on. And with dating apps, you can find all this stuff out pretty quickly, right? And then when you meet the person's going to start talking to you and telling you, when I was growing up, my parents were like this, and I didn't really like it. Maybe I went to they forced me to go to church, and I thought that was kind of silly, and I wanted to stop doing it, but they made me for a while, or whatever. You're going to find out all sorts of things about the person that you didn't know by other means or prior to this. But how is it that you're going to learn it? The person is going to speak to you. How is it that she's going to speak to you? Is she going to activate her mind, or is she going to pray? Is she going to use her concepts and reason to think and talk to you about what has happened in her life, or is she going to go by non-evidence and non-knowledge and non-method, right? She's going to use reason. And how are you going to receive the data and understand the data when she's talking to you about her life? You're going to hear it with your ears. That's an aspect of reason. Reason is the faculty that identifies and integrates the material provided by man's senses, right? The sensory organs that we have. So you're getting the data through your ears. You're processing the data conceptually. She's telling you, oh, when I was young, I went to a summer camp and we used to go horseback riding, or whatever she's telling you. And what do all of those things mean? What does it mean to be young and go to summer camp? And what are horses? And what does it mean to ride them? How did you know what any of this means? How are you able to integrate the data that you're hearing? You do it by means of your faculty of reason. So the idea that this bishop is going to tell you that you need faith to really understand this, when she's talking to you, you have to have faith to understand this stuff, is nonsense. And if he's going to try to say, as he is, that what he means is that, well, you've got to have faith in her. You've got to trust her. So he's going to equate faith and trust. We don't need the concept of faith to denote that idea. We already have the concept of trust. If someone is telling you something and it means something to you, whether the person is giving you straightforward, honest, good data or not, then you need to assess the person. You need to say, what do I know about this person's character so far? Is she coming across through the evidence of my senses and my ability to process the data coming in? Does she seem to be the kind of person who would be telling me the truth? Has she said anything that's suspicious, anything I know is false, et cetera, et cetera? You're analyzing and evaluating things all the time. What faculty enables you to do that? Your rational faculty, the faculty that gathers the data provided by your senses and synthesizes that data into concepts and propositions and principles and judgments of people. So there is no room for faith in this landscape here. Yet the bishop is going to try to claim this ground by saying that you have to have faith to operate this way, to get to know someone. But that is just nonsense.
She will disclose to you truths about herself that exist within her own interiority, in her own heart, and can only come forth through her free decision to speak.
Yes, and her free decision to speak is a choice made using the faculty of reason. She's going to say to herself, in effect, does this guy seem trustworthy? Does he seem safe? Does he seem reasonable? Does he seem interesting? Does he have any values, so far as I can tell, in common with my values? She's going to ask herself these kinds of questions. Well, question asking is precisely a process of reasoning. Reason is a matter of looking at reality and saying, what is this thing? What is that thing? Who is this person? What do I know about this person? How can I fit these ideas together? All of that question asking is done through your faculty of reason. So again, for the bishop to be trying to get any ground here for faith in this sphere he's talking about is just comical.
This is true of your relation to any person, right? At that point, you've got to make a decision. Decision is, well, do I believe her or not? I don't know. I can't verify these things objectively. I can't do a Google search and find out if they're true. I have to decide, yeah, I believe this person. I have come to trust her in such a way that I now accept her speech as true.
Again, this has nothing to do with faith. We have to assess people based on the available and relevant evidence that we have about them. Oftentimes, almost invariably, actually, the evidence is inconclusive about people. You can't get into someone else's head and know whether he or she is telling you the truth or being honest or where the person got her ideas from or any of that. All you can do is go on what the person says and how he or she acts over time. And then you, using your sensory apparatuses and your rational faculty to judge, you have to make some decisions. Yes, you have to do that, but you don't make them by faith. This isn't. Now, if he's going to say, well, you're trusting your judgment or you're trusting this person based on your judgment, fine, but that's all reason too. So he's trying to claim that we need to call what we normally would call trust, we need to call that faith for some reason. He hasn't given us a good reason for calling it faith rather than just trust. Then he's saying that, and you have to use judgment in order to arrive at that kind of trust or faith. Well, yeah, you do have to use judgment to arrive at your decision whether you're going to trust someone or not, but you do that by means of reason. So all he's doing here is, by accident, supporting the fact that we have to use reason in order to understand the world and other people and ourselves and what's true and what's false and who's good and who's not. All of that is a process of reasoning. So he's basically conceding all of this here, unbeknownst to him, in his effort to claim that you have to use faith to do any of this. So listen to how this goes.
This is a very apt and illuminating analogy for what serious Catholics, I'll speak for my tradition, mean by faith. We want to come to know God.
We want to come to know God. Why? Why do we want to come to know God? What is God? Does he even exist? Is there any evidence for the existence of God? We want to come to know God is not a starting point for anybody rational. We want to come to know the world and reality and ourselves and our needs and what's necessary to live a beautiful life and have a wonderful career and relationships and recreational activities and all the wonderful things that make human life great. We don't need to come to know God. We don't even know that God exists until we start asking the question, what is God? How are you defining this thing? And what would be our method of knowing God? Can we see him? Does he show up and say, hey, I'm here. I wanted to tell you about myself, like the girl that you go on a date with? He doesn't. So it's a different kind of thing. Indeed, it's a made up thing. And so we just got this weird shift from talking about the secular, factual world in which we live, where, people exist and things are what they are and things act in accordance with their identities. And we can make judgments based on observation and integration and logic and all of that. And now all of a sudden we're being told that, this is an analogy for this thing that we need to know, God. That's an illegal chess move, so to speak. Or certainly an illogical move. There is no there. There's no way to justify that.
Can we determine a lot about God on the basis of reason?
You can't determine anything about God on the basis of reason unless you're talking about identifying the fact that the concept of God is nonsense. Nonsense in the literal sense of that term. There's nothing that reaches the sensory level. There is no sense, nonsense. There's nothing about God reaches the sensory level. You can't see him, hear him, touch him, taste him. He has nothing to do with the faculty of reason. He is made up whole cloth. He's in the pages of a book that claims that he exists, or several books that claim he exists, granted, but there are all sorts of fiction books out there that claim that goblins exist and that pixies exist and so on and so forth. Doesn't mean that they exist. So This is just a complete non sequitur that he's engaging in here, and he's trying to drag you with him.
Look at the beauty and order and contingency of the world. Look at some of my videos on those things. I can conclude that God exists, that God is perfect, that God is good, that God has intelligence and will and freedom, that God is the governor and providential, has providential care over the universe. I can determine all those things on the basis of reason alone.
Okay, so he's saying that he can conclude that God exists and that he's perfect and that he's good, etc., all through the use of reason. No, he can't, which is why he can't explain to you how he can do any of that through reason. The fact that the universe exists and that it's governed by natural law and that things are what they are and they remain what they are until they change, in which case they change into something that they, new thing that they are, and that things act in accordance with their identity, the law of causality. All of these facts about the world are fundamental axioms. Existence exists, things are what they are, things act in accordance with their identities. That's the starting point of human knowledge. It's not, we open our eyes and we're here, but we have to justify how all of this exists. We have to presuppose that a God made all of this happen. That is completely arbitrary. It's just the primacy of consciousness. It's just saying, oh, no, we can't have existence be primary. There has to be a consciousness that made existence exist. 100% illogical, and there's no Aristotle called this senseless duplication, trying to hypothesize that there's another world that's going to help us explain this one. And he was talking about Plato's theory of forms, or world of forms, in when he talks about it as senseless duplication. But that's exactly what this kind of thing is. We don't need to invent another world to explain this world. This world is plenty complex and difficult to understand in various ways. Let's keep our minds focused on this world so that we can do that. We've come a long way. Think about coming out of the cave and where we are today, what human beings have done using their rational faculties. They didn't do any of this by means of prayer, and faith had nothing to do with it. They didn't. Accepting ideas with no evidence to support the ideas is not how we have risen from the caves to where we are. But we're being told here by this bishop that faith is to be credited for all of these things, in effect, and that we couldn't do any of it without faith. He's equating faith with trust as part of his method of doing that. And now he's going to move toward why you have to use faith to accept God's will. And to do that, of course, you have to accept that God exists.
If you doubt me, take a look at the first part of the great Summa Theologiae of Thomas Aquinas.
Okay, well, this is an argument from authority. He's going to say, if you doubt me, go read Thomas Aquinas. Go read this tome that's this thick, by the way, the Summa Theologica. And then you'll understand. No, Bishop, if you're a professional intellectual, which you most certainly are not, but you're posing as one, if you're a professional intellectual, your job is to be able to explain things clearly and in plain English so that intelligent, active-minded people can understand what you're saying. And you're not doing that here. You're not even coming close to it. So pawning this off on Aquinas is not going to do.
Thomas Aquinas is a bit like the Sherlock Holmes of theology. What I mean is, think of how we would ordinarily look at someone and we come to certain conclusions. Sherlock Holmes saw with such insight that he could come to all kinds of correct conclusions simply on the basis of examination. Before the person ever spoke, Sherlock Holmes could determine a lot about them, right? So Thomas Aquinas is the Sherlock Holmes of theology. He can determine all kinds of things about God on the basis of reason alone. Is this good? Yes. The Catholic tradition says authentic faith never involves a sacrificium intellectus, Latin for a sacrifice of the intellect.
Oh, thanks for bringing in the Latin there to make it sound like this was more elevated. This is nonsensical, by the way, for the bishop to be telling you that, oh, look, the Catholic Church would never claim that you should sacrifice your intellect. Now, what is your intellect? Your intellect is your rational faculty. It's your ability to understand the world on the basis of observation sensory observation, evidence of what is, integration through the use of concepts. You form concepts on the basis of your observations. You see dogs and you see cats and you see birds and the like, and you form the concept of dog because these particular animals have a range of characteristics that are similar and they're unlike the range of characteristics that these other animals have. And so we form concepts like dog and cat and bird, and then we form broader concepts like animal, which subsume those earlier concepts, and we're becoming more abstract in our thinking now. This is how the human mind works. And it works, your intellect works, because you respect the fact, or only to the extent that you respect the fact that you need to keep your intellect connected to reality, connected to the perceptual level, and you need to keep your concepts connected to reality, and you need to kick out any contradictions you find, because contradictions can't exist in reality. Things are what they are. They can't be what they're not. So you don't want to let any contradictions into your mind, right? This is how reason works, and this is what he is trying to claim you can't do without reason, without faith in some way.
In fact, one of the signs that you're not dealing with authentic faith is that you've had to sacrifice your mind. See, now I would characterize that as a fundamentalism or a fideism, to use the technical term. In the Catholic tradition, we say, if you are sacrificing your intellect in any way, you're not dealing with authentic faith.
Of course, he doesn't want you to think that religion is going to have you sacrifice your mind. And the Protestants will say this pretty straightforwardly. You know, reason is the devil's whore, and the like. You get some rich stuff from the Protestants. The Catholics don't want to do that because they've got some Aristotelian elements in their philosophy. So they have some marginal respect for the mind. So you're not going to hear this guy say, you need to sacrifice your mind. Although in a future video we're going to hear another Catholic talk very directly about how you should sacrifice your mind. So, you know, the contradiction's on them, not on me. But Bishop Barron is not willing to say that you should sacrifice your mind. And he's trying to give you some degree of confidence here that he would never do that, and that, you know, moving in the direction of Catholicism and their version of faith is something that respects your mind, right? Well, let's see how that holds up with the rest of what he says.
One of the deepest truths about God is that God is a person, right? God is paradigmatically a person. He's the ground of all personhood. He's the supreme person.
So God is a person. He's not just a person, though. He's the ground of all personhood. Now, what we're going to start moving toward here, as you might have already suspected, is that you have trust in other people. You trust a girl you go on a date with, or a guy you go on a date with, when he or she starts telling you, oh, here's how things have gone in my life. And you have to say, do I trust this person or not? And now we're going to be told, well, if you're going to trust those kinds of beings, those imperfect beings that may or may not be right, that may or may not be honest, you definitely need to trust or have faith in the supreme being who would never lie about anything. And that's where we're headed. So listen up.
If you really want to know God, what do you have to do? You have to wait for this free person to speak, right? I can get to know someone, you know, to some degree, but I will never really know that person until she speaks. At which point I've got to make that decision. Do I believe her or not? Do I trust her or not? So with God. The claim of the Bible is that God has not remained utterly hidden, has not remained utterly in the shadows, but that God, by his own freedom and choice, has determined to speak. He thereby reveals things to us that we can never know simply on objective analytical grounds. I'm not denigrating in any way what we can know on those grounds, but we can't know the heart of God until God decides to speak.
All right, here we go. So, in order to know God, and first of all, to know God's mind, God's will, what God wants, what God is saying to you, he would have to exist. So he's already jumped over whether God exists by just saying, look, you trust people and you trust what they say, you should trust what God says. Now, how are you going to find out what God says? Have you gone on a walk with God? Has he spoken to you? I doubt it. If he has, you're probably in need of some psychological help. If you think that there are spirits speaking with you, right? You can speak to God. People do that all the time. They go, "Hey, please, God, help me win this football game." But that is not the same thing as God speaking to you. Just bear that in mind too. He's like, "You've got this thing going on where God's going to be speaking to you." I don't think so. And that he hadn't spoken with you either. There is no evidence for this alleged thing that's supposed to be speaking to you. So we've just skipped over all of that, and we're just on the assumption that God exists, and now he's going to speak to you, and you just have to decide whether you're going to trust him. Well, how is he going to speak to you? He's going to speak to you through people like Bishop Barron. He's going to speak to you through the Bible. He's going to speak to you through stories that people are telling. And yes, you do have a decision to make. Am I going to trust these people that are telling me things that don't integrate with any of the knowledge that I have about the world and the way that things are? And I think you should take that question very, very seriously.
What's faith? Faith for us is that moment of trust. When I say, yes, I accept the truth of the God who speaks.
Faith is when I say, yes, I accept the truth of the God who speaks. So, faith here again is being conflated with trust. We don't need the concept of faith if all we mean by this is trust. So let's just take faith out of there, and we say, so where we are is, yeah, you should trust God when he speaks to you. Okay, if I could see God, or if there was any evidence that God exists, or any evidence that God could speak other than through Bishop or through Moses or through a book, then I might do that. But there is no such evidence. So all I have is people speaking, telling me that there's this God for whom there's no evidence, none that they can actually provide. They'll keep telling you, oh, yeah, there is evidence. We can even prove through reason that God exists. Yeah, try it. People have been trying this for millennia, and it doesn't work. There's no there. There is no proof. So what is going on here is this religious person, like so many others, is refusing to name what he actually is treating faith as, and that is as a means of knowledge. He's claiming that you can know God exists and that God's word is all good and all knowing, et cetera, and that your means of knowing this is faith, acceptance of ideas in the absence of evidence to support them. Religious people do not like to claim or acknowledge that that is what faith is. They want you to equate faith with trust so that you'll buy into the idea that, yeah, I should have faith. I have faith all the time. It's one of the things that I use in my life, and I get by with it. No, you don't. You get by with trust and thought and confidence and all sorts of things that if you're going to trust people legitimately and have confidence in institutions or airplanes or the like legitimately, you have to use your rational faculty to say, what is this company's, track record, and how do I know that? And what has this person done? Are there any red flags here, et cetera, et cetera? Reason is your means of knowing these things. Faith has nothing to do with it.
There's no other way, finally, to know and relate to a person other than faith. And that's true in our human relationships as well.
So there's no way you can relate to a person. Now, this is his conclusion. After all of this mumbo jumbo, here's his conclusion. There's no way that you can relate to a person other than through faith. So you and me relating to each other here, or you and your girlfriend or boyfriend or wife or friend or whatever, when you're having a conversation and you're using your ears and your eyes and your touch to communicate with each other, and you're conceptualizing the things that you learn and you're integrating those and you're drawing conclusions, you're doing all these things that are reason, that are aspects of the faculty of reason. You're being told by this bishop that you can't do any of those things unless you have faith. And this is how they get people to buy in to the notion that faith is a good thing and that having faith or having faith in the existence of God, etc., is a virtue. But it's not a virtue, it's a vice. It is precisely the sacrifice of your mind. He's telling you it's not, but he's showing you that it is.
If you were to say, in regard to another person, I will only go on what I can absolutely know through analytical reason.
No one claims that you can only go on what you know through analytical reason. This is a technical term, by the way, analytical reason. It means analysis. So it means taking things apart and analyzing them. And it's most affiliated with deduction, which is the process of taking premises and drawing conclusions from those premises. But that is not the kind of that is a kind of reasoning. It's an important kind of reasoning, but it's not the kind of reasoning that we use when we're engaging with people generally. When we're engaging with people generally, we're using inductive reasoning. We're observing the way that people act. We're observing instances of people doing things, and then we're drawing generalizations about those instances, those particular instances. And that's how we draw conclusions about what we think about people and whether we think we should trust them. This is a process of reasoning. It is not an analytical process of reasoning. It's a synthetic process of reasoning. It's a synthesizing, a bringing together of the various things that we've seen. So be careful when these guys start throwing technical terminology around, because that's all he's doing there. And he's trying to claim that the only way that you use reason is just by like adding things up or counting things or using deductive logic. That's not the only way that we use it. Reason is the faculty that engages in this whole amazingly broad, deep, and rich process of observing reality, integrating what we learn into concepts, using those concepts to learn more about reality, using the laws of logic to make sure that we don't have any contradictions in the concepts or propositions that we're engaging in our minds, and so on. And he's skipping past this to try to make it sound like reason is this very narrow sort of deductive process, and that to really get to know people, you have to use faith. But again, if he hasn't even defined faith, he's just said it's like trust, basically. So be very careful when people refuse to define their terms. I'll define reason right now. It's a relatively easy concept to define. It's the faculty that identifies and integrates. So you identify through your senses and you integrate through conceptual integration. So it's the faculty that identifies and integrates the material provided by your senses. Why can't religionists just give a simple, straightforward definition of faith like that isn't piggybacking on or robbing some other concept like trust? We don't need a new word for trust. We already have the word trust. It's a very simple word. But that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is trying to get away with something here when it sounds easy and just nothing threatening about saying I have faith in this person in the same way that I have trust in this person. But then they're going to use that. They're basically going to do a bait and switch and then use that to try to say, and therefore you must have faith in the existence and in the Word of God.
How much of that person will you ever know? Very little. How much of that person will you ever be able to love? Very little, see, because you're in utter control of the process of knowing that person.
Everything you know about a person and everything you know that helps you to either love a person or to realize that you shouldn't love a person or anything of the sort, you gained through reason. Reason doesn't mean you ignore emotions. Emotions are facts, very important facts about human life. Therefore, when you're using reason, the faculty that's supposed to help you integrate fact, you want to take into account emotions. Your emotions about a person, his or her emotions about you, the very emotional elements of the relationship. All of this stuff is fact. And to be rational, you have to take the facts, the full context of available and relevant facts, including emotions, into account when you're thinking about these things. And this is how you learn whether a person is worthy of your love. And then the love itself, being an emotion, emotions and reason have a very interesting relationship with each other. It should be a harmonious relationship. Reason is your means of understanding the world. It's your means of knowledge. And your emotions are your psychological means of experiencing your values. So if you really value a person and you're like, wow, every time I'm around this person, he or she makes me feel good and confident, and we have fun together, and we laugh at the same things, and we enjoy the same music and art and so on and so forth. This is the kind of thing, this is the kind of valuing that flourishes into love eventually, sometimes romantic love. And when that happens, you arrived at this integration of ideas and values using your rational faculty, and then you get the fruit of it through your emotional faculty, where you feel the love and you feel the friendship and you feel all of these things. So there's no contradiction here between reason and emotion. And there's no need for faith in any of this. Reason and emotion are genuine faculties. You know you have them. You know you have reason because you use it all the time. Hopefully you use it as a matter of principle. And you know you have emotions because you've experienced them all the time. Why do we need faith in any of this? We don't. But the bishop is trying to tell you that you can't do any of this without faith, even though he hasn't even told you what faith is, other than trying to liken it to trust.
You have effectively objectified the person. You've made that person an object of your investigation. Now, a fortiori in regard to God, right? God, who is the supreme person. Over and over again on these YouTube pieces, people will say something like, unless I can absolutely prove it, unless you can show me with pure analytical reason. And I want to say, come on. I'll show you a lot through analytical reason. I'll give you arguments for God's existence and so on. Fine. But you see how you've locked yourself in to this little narrow space. I will only accept what I can absolutely control. Well, heck, you'll never know a person on those terms.
No rational person says, I will only accept what I can absolutely control. The only thing you control in this world is your choice to activate your mind or not. That's essentially the extent of your control. And that's a huge amount of control, because you can decide to activate your mind and take into account all of the available and relevant facts, including the emotions that you have and the long-term goals that you have. So you can do a lot with this degree of control. But you don't accept only the things that you control. In fact, you have to accept all sorts of things you can't control. You have to accept the law of gravity. You have to accept the law of identity. I mean, you can say you're not going to accept these things, but to act in a way that doesn't accept them is impossible and dangerous if you even try it, right? So this is just mumbo jumbo from the bishop here. He's just spewing word salad at this point, trying to get you, in effect, trying to intimidate you. He's bringing out more Latin as well, trying to intimidate you to make you feel like, oh, I don't know as much as this bishop knows. Maybe I should just capitulate and agree that he's making a good point here. He's not making a good point. If his points don't make sense to you, you shouldn't accept them. And it doesn't make you stupid if you can't follow his moronic, non-logical connections. It makes you astute.
If God is a person, he invites faith. Doesn't mean naivete, credulity, accepting superstitious nonsense. You know, I'm driving it. Just as another person, finally, invites you to have faith. How come you married that man or that woman, right? Oh, it's because I had absolutely analytical control over every... Come on. At some point, there was a mutual act of trust. Call it faith, or an exchange of hearts, right?
How come I married my wife? I can tell you exactly why I married my wife, because using my rational faculty and engaging with her over, many months, I came to realize that she has all of these qualities that I adore. I could see and have conversations with her using our concepts and using logic. I could see that she had a view of the world that matched mine. She thought that values were really, really important. She thought that honesty was really, really important. She thought that justice was an absolute imperative. We would go to movies and see, acts of justice committed, and both of us would just get all riled up together about, oh yeah, the good guys beat the bad guys or whatever. And all of this is happening. This is extremely emotionally charged, right? But all of it is happening in terms of my coming to know my wife. What is the faculty that is enabling me to do that? It's reason. And again, there's no dichotomy. It's not like because you're rational, you can't be emotional. In fact, to be non-emotional would be utterly irrational. Emotion is a hugely important aspect of human life. But your emotions are not your means of knowledge. Reason is your means of knowledge. And faith is not your means of knowledge. Faith is the acceptance of ideas in the absence of evidence supporting those ideas, or in defiance of evidence that contradicts those ideas. So don't let these religionists, these professional religionists, try to use this mumbo-jumbo language to convince you that faith is some natural, necessary aspect of your life. It is not. And they often do it by conflating it with trust. At some point with my wife, there was a mutual act of trust, and he says, call it faith. No, I won't call it faith. There was more than a mutual act of trust. There was a mutual coming together of our values, of trust being one of them, the importance of trusting someone. Well, of course, you should trust someone, but there's all sorts of values packed into a romantic relationship. It's a hell of a lot more than trust, and faith has nothing to do with it. It's your taking seriously the values that your life depends on, and your personal values, the things that you've chosen that are really valuable to you and important to you, and finding someone else who says yes to that kind of that sort of constellation of values and that kind of life. And that's what starts to cause a relationship to flower into a romantic relationship. So it's not that, oh, you meet someone and then you have to trust them, and we call that trust faith, and there's your romance.
Faith is the act of saying, Lord, I accept, I trust what you've revealed to me in your own freedom.
Faith is saying to the Lord that you trust him. Where did this Lord come from? Why should I even accept that there is a Lord? Where's the evidence of this Lord? What reason is there for me to accept that there is a Lord? Forget what the Lord is going to say. I don't even believe the Lord exists. Why? Because there's no evidence to believe the Lord exists. It's just a story in a book. And these guys continue to take it seriously, despite the fact that religion has destroyed human life in so many ways. And I'm not just talking about the bloody wars and the witch trials and the burnings of heretics and all of that. I'm talking about the psychological damage that it has done by insisting that people sacrifice their minds, their judgment, their values, their self-interest to an alleged God, person, man thing that's three in one at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. This is just poison, and it's poison being delivered with a smile and a little bit of Latin and a whole lot of intimidation.
Faith is not opposed to reason, though it goes beyond it. Just as that trust in another person is not irrational, but it does go beyond reason.
Oh, now we're going to be told faith is not opposed to reason, because all it really means is just trust, don't you remember? But faith also goes beyond reason. Faith is going to be bigger and more important than reason, we're going to be told now. And of course they have to say that, because otherwise, if your reason is so bold as to keep asking the question why. This is why Calvin, both Calvin and Luther had really choice words for reason. They called reason the devil's whore and a charlotte and all sorts of things. And they damned reason, and they damned Aristotle for delivering reason to the world, or delivering logic to the world. These are not compatible. Reason is completely incompatible. The idea that you should accept ideas on the basis of evidence and logic is completely incompatible with the idea that you should accept ideas that are not based on evidence and logic. So we can put it that way.
So in regard to God, we have finally to have faith precisely because we're dealing with the supreme person.
We have to have faith because we're dealing with a supreme person. There you have it. You have to have faith because you're dealing with a supreme person. So everything we just heard about how faith is just, it's just another word for trust, and you use it all the time. It's no big deal. Comes down to you have to have faith in this supreme person because he's a supreme person, right? And this is where they grab you and pull you in, and this is where the real sacrifice of your mind begins. Or at least, well, it begins as soon as you capitulate to the idea that you don't need evidence and logic in support of your ideas. But once they get you in, and this is why it's so hard for a lot of people to leave the church, because they convince you that there's something more important and more powerful than reason, and there's a realm that's more important and more divine than this world and than human life. But the fact is, there is not. Human life is divine. Reality is the environment in which we live and in which we get to play out this beautiful thing called human life. And the way that we do that is by using our rational faculty to understand the world and our needs so that we can act accordingly and live beautiful lives. Don't let these professional religionists pull the wool over your eyes and kid you into thinking that faith is a necessary part of any aspect of this. It is not. That's it for one more instance or one more episode analyzing the way that professional religious people talk about faith. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I hope you'll join me again. I'll have another video on this in this same series out within a day or three. So I hope you'll show up for that. And in the meantime, keep using your mind and loving your life.